before the film came out, there was a lot of these sort of dietitians and experts saying you can't get enough protein from plants, right? Or the quality of the protein's not good. And I literally got people messaging me saying, hey, I went vegan after your film, and now I've watched this Chris Kresser episode, and like you were full of shit. Go on, the same people writing back and saying, oh, sorry, I should have waited until the debate. We're currently working on the sequel. We've partnered with James and his team.
All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day.
All right, James, brother, welcome to the show, man. How's your day going so far?
Great. Yeah. How's yours? Going well?
Good. We're, you know what? It's our 4-year anniversary of Fit Vegan existing today. So just a big day of celebration. So I'm happy we get to record on this day.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So good, man. So I've spoken to a few people, and surprisingly, some people haven't seen the Game Changers yet. And so my hope is that we can get some people to watch it or rewatch it, because I think it was a pivotal movie in terms of the plant-based community, the vegan community. But I'd love to chat a little bit of like your background that kind of led you to be in a position to kind of make the Game Changers movie. So you have a huge fighting background, as we just did with the intro. So kind of like what got you into that?
It was partly my family sort of history. So my grandfather faked his birth certificate in World War II. I was like 14 years old to like go and fight behind enemy lines and stuff. And then so he was sort of a fighting guy. And my dad and my uncle was a very high level karate fighter as well. So it was sort of in the blood or in the family or whatever. And also I just loved Bruce Lee movies when I was younger. Yeah. Cool. So started training in martial arts when I was 8 years old, but really got into it when I was 15. And then around that age, I sort of got picked on in the street. Someone punched me in the face a couple of times. I was bleeding. I was in a bit of shock, and I didn't use any of my martial arts training. And that's when I decided at that point, I'm going to get 5 black belts, which I'm not sure was the best goal. But that sort of led me down this path, and then ended up coming to the States to, as Bruce Lee would say, research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. That was his search for truth in combat. And so I sort of pursued that, my own path on that, and ended up in the US training with a guy called Paul Vunak, who developed the Navy SEAL program for unarmed combat, and then also my main MMA coach, Eric Paulson, who's a world-renowned MMA coach out here in California as well.
So it sounds like that moment where you got punched in the face a few times was kind of the pivotal moment of, I need to be able to translate those skills into basically real life situations.
Yeah, I just didn't want that to happen to me again. And I realized my training to that thus far had not been very realistic. So I started training a lot more realistically.
Yeah, I used to do martial arts. I was a black belt, 2nd degree. And you're right. When you're trained in that way, there's not necessarily a real life application, because when you're put in that scenario, you're stressed. You necessarily don't think of using like the blocking and the hitting in a specific way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so when you went to kind of train some of those government agencies, right? Like I was reading up on like U.S. Marshals, Marines, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs. Mm-hmm. How was it to work with those guys? And again, what puts you in that position to be able to train those guys?
Yeah, well, I came out here, like I said, to train with the guy that developed the Navy SEAL Armed Combat Program. And then because people knew that I trained with him, then sort of doors started opening in the military and other government agencies. And so sort of one thing led to another. But yeah, surprisingly, I was training the Marines down at Camp Pendleton every month. And then they used to have a fight team down there as well. So we do more of the combative stuff once a month, and then sort of more mixed martial arts stuff every week. And there's some tough guys there, obviously, but they're not. It's not like the movies. They're not all like super skilled in hand-to-hand combat. Training. So just getting the training in with the instructor trainers, and then they were training people below them. I was very fortunate to be able to train a bunch of guys that were using this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and just more of a genuine curiosity. Because I know you did the UFC as well, and you won some of those fights. How was it training for yourself in that realm and training other people to now training people from government agencies. I'm going to assume that when you're training for UFC, not necessarily like your life is on the line, but it's like we're talking about winning here, but having people that their life is on the line. How does that change the dynamic of the exercise, of the training?
Yeah, well, what I teach, the mixed martial arts is a great base, but a lot of stuff that I'm teaching in the sort of self-defense or combatives world, real life, is stuff that's banned in the UFC. So take everything that's not allowed in the UFC and teach that, all right? So it's a great base to have boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, that type of thing, Muay Thai. That's sort of a combative base, and you learn to get hit and learn for people to try and take you down. But we're adding in all the tools that, headbutts, eye gouges, this type of kicking the groin, learning to defend against weapons, 2-on-1 principles, this type of stuff wouldn't be allowed in UFC.
Yeah, okay, I can see why you wouldn't be able to use that in the octagon. And so when did like that, I would say I saw the movie, but for the people that haven't, like when did that transition to you being interested in plant-based eating come about?
Yeah, I tore ligaments in both of my knees, sparring with a future heavyweight champion, Fabricio Verdum. He had about 70 or 80 pounds on me, and we were sparring, and he kneed me, and I got off the floor, and then we both sort of landed on my back. He landed on my back, and we both landed in a mess on the floor, and feet slipped out on some sweat, and blew out ligaments in both of my knees, or tore them. And so, I thought, well, I'm going to have at least 6 months where I can't really train. What can I do that's productive with my time? So I decided to look into the peer-reviewed evidence on nutrition for optimal recovery. And that's when I came across a study about the Roman gladiators, which you've seen in the film. But the archaeologist unearthed over 5,000 gladiator bones, did a strontium, calcium, and radioisotope analysis, and could tell that the gladiators were eating almost exclusively, if not exclusively, plants. And I thought, well, that can't be true, because you need meat for muscle and dairy for bone health. Yeah. And that sort of set me on this search for truth. Used to be in a search for truth for combat, and now I was on this search for truth in nutrition. There's a lot of sort of parallels there, because there's a lot of nonsense in martial arts, and there's a lot of nonsense out there, especially on social media, about what good nutrition is.
Yeah, especially nowadays. I feel like more people are creating controversial pieces of content, like just Paul Saladino and kind of some that whole crew that's out there. What made you resonate to that study more? Because let's be honest, when a lot of people are going to do research, you can pretty much find a piece of research and kind of back up whatever belief is out there. So why did that connect with you specifically that made you want to like dive deeper into that specific realm?
Yeah, well, I mean, that wasn't enough to convince me that was true, but it was sort of like an inciting incident. It got me curious. I'm like, wait a minute, I've always been told. I wouldn't have gone a single meal with that animal protein before. Yeah. I remember walking into a restaurant a little bit before that with a friend of mine who's 6'5", 265-pound bodybuilder. And we went in and the chicken was spelt funny. I said, why is it spelt funny? He said, well, it's not real chicken. It's made from plants. And I said, okay, well, what meat do you have? They said, no, we don't have any meat here. I said, okay, we'll take some eggs. Or he said, no, there's no eggs. It's a vegan restaurant. We looked at each other and just walked out. So I wouldn't eat a single meal with that animal protein, because it was so ingrained in me that you needed, animal protein was synonymous with protein. I mean, meat and eggs and dairy. I didn't think you got. I thought sort of vegetables were for a bit of fiber and vitamins and minerals. I didn't think.
How did your community kind of like take it as you kind of change your nutrition? Because it's such a big part of the societal masculine energy, especially if you're a fighter and you're doing some of these more quote unquote like alpha type of sports. Like, how was it for you to kind of make that transition and go about that within your community?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people that sort of made fun of it and just didn't understand why I was doing it, and were sort of doubtful that I'd be able to maintain stamina and strength. But then when I did, it was sort of undeniable. So I think quite a few people in Orange County in the MMA community started shifting towards more plant-forward eating or completely vegan. After I went vegan, especially once they saw I was doing it for a while, and my endurance was great, and I was doing great in the gym. They were pretty open to it overall.
And how did you transition? Did you just go like overnight? You transitioned to plant-based?
Okay, I'm going vegan. I said, okay, let me give this a try. I'll try and go plant-based. So I cut out meat. I was still doing fish, eggs, dairy, and I cut out dairy, I think, and then fish and eggs was sort of the last to go. And I did it over like a 6-week period or so. And then, very quickly after I did, went completely plant-based, my endurance improved a lot, like doing the ropes. What I don't show in the film was my strength also improved. Like dumbbell press, I was doing 5 reps of 105 in each hand dumbbell. Yeah. And then went up to 115 in each hand for 6 reps within a few weeks of switching. Oh, wow. It's common with everybody, but helped me break through a plateau that I've been stuck at for a couple of years.
And so was the emphasis for you to just replace the amount of protein you were consuming to plant-based sources, or did you just not necessarily worry about protein and you just try to eat plant-based as much as you could?
I still kept protein up a little bit, doing tofu, tempeh, lentils, beans. I switched to a vegan protein powder as well at one point. Okay. Although I haven't consistently taken protein powder the whole time. But I was sort of cognizant of protein intakes. And so, and it's great. Even since the game changers came out, there's been more studies, randomized controlled trials, comparing plant protein to animal protein. And if you look at the outcome data, in terms of building a maximal muscle mass, there wasn't really a difference where the protein source came from, even if it was completely vegan. Versus, like an omnivorous diet supplementing with whey versus a completely vegan diet supplementing with vegan protein. As long as you're getting 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, then there was no difference. So, so even back then, I was sort of familiar with a lot of that literature. So just make sure you got protein. Yeah.
Because it feels like the number of protein, there's been more studies kind of coming out that the amount necessary for an athlete is actually lower, because usually people will go for the usual 1 gram per pound of body weight. Mm-hmm. So is that kind of what you were adhering to before and then kind of transition to that 1.6 per kg?
No, I wasn't even at the 1 gram per pound. I was around the 1.6 grams. So there was even some evidence back then that it was probably sufficient. Although it's been reinforced, 1.6 grams per kilogram, comparing plant and animal. And then now really 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. That hasn't been really compared in plant versus animal. Yeah. But I can't see, I think it's very unlikely to be different, but to be safe, probably 1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Now that assumes a caloric surplus or a eukaloric state. If you're in caloric deficit, in other words, you're trying to lose body fat, and so you're under eating calories, then your protein requirements likely go up because of something called gluconeogenesis, which is where your body's going to steal protein from those building blocks and use them to convert to glucose. But again, that doesn't matter whether it's animal-based or plant-based. That concept still applies. Your protein requirements do just go up if you're. And again, you've got to be working out, right, to maximize these. And we're talking about actually to maximize muscle mass. For a lot of endurance athletes, 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, probably going to be fine. So.
Yeah, for sure. And also like a lot of time when people go in a deficit, the whole point is to preserve as much lean muscle mass as possible, right? It's pretty hard to trying to put on lean muscle mass as if you were in a surplus.
Yeah, it depends. You wouldn't probably don't do as much, but it depends on how new to training you are, I think. I mean, it is possible to gain muscle while losing fat. It's a lot harder, and it depends on, if you're a newbie to training, it's more likely than if you've been training for quite a few years.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I could go back to newbie gains. It's gone a long time ago. And so when in that process did you decide to kind of make the movie? Because it's one thing for you to put an emphasis on your own recovery and kind of do things for you to build your own stamina and your own strength and speed up the healing process. You can go back to doing what you were doing. But what made it that you wanted to basically turn this into a movie and ultimately have the huge backing that you got, right? With like Arnold and Chris Paul and Novak and Jackie Chan and Lewis.
Yeah, it was pretty early on when I started realizing, wait a minute, I've been lied to, and I hate being lied to, and I felt like I've got to let everybody know. So I woke up at 2 a.m. I'm like, I should make a documentary about this, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So it was pretty early on where I hadn't even fully committed to going completely plant-based at that point. I was plant-based at the time in a sort of trial period, seeing how I felt, but the more and more I dug into it. So that's when I started reaching out to the head of nutrition at Harvard, the head of anthropology at Harvard, the president of the American College of Cardiology, the lead delegate of urology for the American Medical Association. And all those people ended up in the film. And so just started speaking to them. And I thought, this is crazy. It's not, because I'd really relied on sort of blogs and magazines and that type of stuff for nutrition advice. And often, one, it's very misleading. There's all the myths around animal protein, whey protein. But also, a lot of those people are on steroids, and so their workout recommendations or nutrition recommendations aren't necessarily going to apply to everyone that's not. So just really dug into the peer-reviewed research, and while making the film in that first year, I spent over 1,000 hours looking at peer-reviewed science, and probably to date over 3,000 hours of looking at peer-reviewed science on nutrition so far.
What were some of the most shocking things that you kind of discovered throughout all those studies and out of filming the documentary? Because you guys got access to some pretty high-level athletes, and there's some pretty remarkable scenes in there that kind of went viral. The burrito being one of them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest takeaways for me wasn't really a specific study or a certain number or graphic or anything else, but it was more this concept that animals are just the middleman, and protein that they're eating originates in plants. And really they're doing a disservice because they're utilizing the fiber, absorbing a lot of the phytonutrients and antioxidants, and then they're spitting out, the saturated fat, bacterial endotoxins, and some of these other negative things that can have health consequences. So, yes, you may as well just get and also like the PCBs and the furans and all these toxins are higher as you go up the trophic levels up the food chain. You're just better off getting the nutrients from as low on the food chain as possible, or on that source. So just get the protein from plants instead.
Yeah, the animals get all the good stuff basically, and people are eating the shit left over.
Yeah, just eating them flesh and the muscle. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, did you know that it would have this type of impact after? Because, I've been vegan for almost a decade now, and it was more in the environmental animal cruelty aspect, but the athlete, the fitness space was always the last one that's never been touched, that no one can ever prove. And I think the Game Changers just like fill that spot perfectly. So like, how did you notice the fitness and the like athletic aspect of sports kind of change as the movie came out?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that happened is before the film came out, and we thought it would resonate well with a lot of people because a lot of people follow sports, and it doesn't matter if you're left wing or right wing. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, right? There's a unifying thing around sports. And so as get people to sort of watch and listen to that and be open to it. And we also know that there are role models, with athletes and also firefighters and that were in the film as well. And like the Australian sort of Navy SEAL equivalent, Damien, that was in the film, talking about the animals and the environment. Like that's also a role model. So we thought that the concept would do well. We thought that people would be open to it. But before the film came out, there was a lot of these sort of dietitians and experts saying you can't get enough protein from plants, you're right, or the quality of the protein's not good. And now those same people, or people like them as well, are saying, okay, well, you can get enough protein, but you've got to be a bit more cognizant about it. Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, you do have to be, you can't just take all the meat and eggs and dairy off your plate and go, okay, I'm just eating vegetables that were left. You do have to think about where your protein's coming from, especially if you're an athlete and trying to optimize athletic performance. But if you're on an omnivorous diet, then you've got to be more cognizant about lots of things, about your fiber intake, keeping low saturated fat intake, higher saturated fats, which you're going to get all of those things. You're going to be better naturally without thinking about it on a vegan diet that's focused towards eating, mostly whole plant foods.
Yeah. And I feel like that was the next argument down for people. At first, it was like, you won't be able to get enough sources of protein. Then it's like, hey, you have to be cautious of how you're combining them. And, I've watched the interview with Chris Kresser on the Joe Rogan podcast. And then I stumbled upon the clip of you talking about like a peanut butter sandwich. It just made me laugh because I was reading the comment and someone was like, find someone that defends you like James defends a peanut butter sandwich. I think you did a great job on that. But like, how was it to us? Because I think you crushed a guy. You really did a good job taking a stand for the movie and kind of the studies and what you guys were trying to prove. And honestly, I think you just helped more people convert out of that conversation. So like, how was it for you to kind of go on there and you're being bombarded left and right the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I actually tried to, first of all, Chris Kresser tried to debunk the film on a previous episode. And I tried to get onto that episode, but it didn't happen. And then I said, okay, can we have our chief science advisor at the time of the film, David Goldman, who's much better read than I am, on the subject. Like, can he debate Chris Kresser? And Joe said, no, I want you on. I was like, oh, okay. So, so I prepped for that. I was ready for a lot more arguments than came up. Yeah, I don't think the funny thing is when you watch Chris Kresser's so-called debunk, I tried to look at it as though I hadn't read the science that I'd read. And I'm thinking, what would a normal person think? And when you watch it, it sounds very convincing. Just much like so do many of these other influencers on social media, right? That are telling you this diet or that, the keto diet, the carnivore diet. Like, it's very convincing. Especially when you tie into the naturalistic fallacy of like eating like our ancestors in the natural way. Like those things combined are sort of a dangerous combination of like charismatic, fit, there's good-looking influencer combined with like this sort of naturalistic fallacy and like appeal to nature. Like eat like our ancestors. That's a dangerous combination. And so I watched that episode thinking, if I was a regular person, I would. And I literally got people messaging me saying, hey, I went vegan after your film, and now I've watched this Chris Kresser episode, and like you were full of shit. And then I go on, the same people write back and say, oh, sorry, I should have waited until the debate. Now I'm back vegan again. So people are pretty fickle, and unfortunately, it's hard because you can't do all that. And most people can't do that research by themselves. They don't have the time or the background to do that science or whatever. So it is tough. But it's very clear, the leading health organizations are all saying that completely vegan diet is totally fine for all stages of the life cycle. All of them are recommending more plant-predominant. All of them are recommending more plant-predominant eating. And I think it's just the way that it's going, despite some of these sort of fringe, carnivore folks or whatever.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind talking about that, because I've been vegan for over a decade now, so I kind of see the waves of people online talking about that. And I feel like, I don't know if it's from Liver King, but that Liver King kind of Paul Saladino era of like eating raw meat and organs, and them just being able to market themselves really push that movement forward. So like, how should people handle that information? Because like you said, they make it sound appealing to someone that doesn't know anything about the subject.
Well, first of all, those people like Liver King, for example, he's a creative person, right?
Yeah.
So there's a company that goes to a marketing agency and says, look, we want to sell these supplements, right?
Yeah.
All these like liver supplements and heart and brain supplements and all of this other stuff. Find us an influencer that we can build that's going to have good presence. And, there'll be a lot of going back and forth on comments and the algorithm. And so like, he's literally a creative person. It's not like he goes out and goes, I'm going to create a brand. Like the company finds him and starts having a push. So and they find someone that's controversial and, obviously got busted for steroids. And the emails that came out. What was funny about those emails is obviously he was on steroids, was that they were saying like, you don't need all the carbs, but he was eating like a ton of carbs in those emails.
Yeah.
So some from maltodextrin powder, and then I think like a bunch of potatoes or whatever.
Was it Derek that exposed the emails? It was like,
sure.
No, Eric, no plates, no plates, no dates. I don't know if you ever heard of that guy.
Yeah, I know who that guy is, but I don't know if he exposed him or not.
Oh, okay, because I know it was something to do because he's pretty vocal about steroid use, and that's kind of when he got busted. Yeah. So basically, companies are basically using these influencers to kind of market certain product, and it's something that most people don't think of. You'd think that it's just a guy that started doing this thing and that started to sell products.
Same with Stephen Gundry. He was like found and created.
Yeah. That's interesting. So do you think, how can people kind of move the plant-based movement forward in the athletic space with kind of what you've seen change over the years?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing people say, well, what can I tell people or give people? I'm like, you got to show them the film. That's the biggest thing, right? It's just tell them to go watch the Game Changers and see what or encourage them to do so. I think people, I just think the plant-based, the vegan movement sometimes hasn't had the best approach at trying to convince people.
Yeah.
It can be like pretty emotionally charged. I think a lot of times you just want to be a good role model. And I'm not saying you can't be outspoken, but I think when you're sort of telling people what they're doing wrong, and like, I don't know that stuff overall is that effective.
I think no one's receptive if you're confrontive. Like if you're confronting them about a belief that they've held for so long, I don't think most people would be receptive to that.
Yeah, you put up cognitive barriers anyway because you think that animal products, as Melanie Joy would say, are like normal, natural, and necessary. So if you have that strongly held belief, plus tied to your identity and going back to hunting and Man the Hunter, which was a misnomer. We talked to the anthropologist that put together the Man the Hunter conference in 1967. And the outcome of that conference was that Man the Hunter was a misnomer, and it should have been Man the Scavenger, Gatherer, Hunter in that order. Hunting was like the last piece of it. But yeah, there's all these sort of longly held beliefs, and if you believe that meat is normal, natural, and necessary, then you're going to put up cognitive barriers anyway to accepting sort of ethical and environmental issues. Yeah. So I think you've got to undo those beliefs about it being normal, natural, and necessary first for people to be open to hearing your arguments about ethical or environmental issues.
Yeah, and it makes sense about the hunting too, right? Like you can preserve grains, you can preserve like agriculture, but for you to be able to preserve meat back in the day, like they could smoke it and stuff, but it just wouldn't last as long.
Its hunting was highly inefficient until the advent of bow and arrow, 60,000 years ago. And, the control of fire happens to coincide with the multiple duplications of our amylase genes, essentially around 800,000 years ago when we were able to control fire. So if you look at Richard Wrangham, who's the chair of anthropology at Harvard, his hypothesis on becoming human is literally based on control of fire and being able to cook. And even potentially like brain encephalization and habitual upright walking. Because if you look at modern foraging societies, they're able to collect up to 4,000 calories an hour by digging up underground tubers and storage organs. Which is highly more, and that's usually like the grandparents and the children doing that and the women, while the men are going off and being super inefficient at going and collecting calories. So, and that was way before the advent of the bow and arrow. Now there would be some persistence hunting, like chasing them down, because most of the animals they're hunting don't have that same endurance. They would overheat and not be able to. So there's some persistence hunting. There was some like running animals off of cliffs and that type of stuff. Yeah. But on the whole, we were just not very efficient hunters. And then it was sort of like this idea of like the Man the Hunter taking down these big animals, whereas like it was like chasing squirrels or,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I don't see chasing a mammoth as like a two-man job. I think it'd be pretty scary. So that's crazy. Yeah. When you think of it, it makes sense. It's really logical, but I don't think people stop to think about like how it actually happened as we were kind of coming up. And I think most people wouldn't have I would say the guts to like for themselves to be able to kill an animal, right? It's like, let's eat like our ancestors, but I'm like, hey, here's a knife, here's a pig. 99.9% of people wouldn't be able to go through with it because they understand that it's another life.
Compassionate as well. A lot of people are naturally compassionate and so forth.
Is there going to be a follow-up to the Game Changers movie? Because, it was really impactful for a lot of people. And I'm sure that it brought up questions that potentially weren't answered in the first movie. So is that something that's in the works?
Yeah, so my nonprofit team, Game Changers Institute, it's a 501c3 foundation. We're currently working on a sequel. We've partnered with LeBron James and his team, Spring Hill. Okay. So we've done a lot of pre-production. We're just starting to shoot, and we're working on that sequel right now.
Beautiful. Is LeBron plant-based or like leaning more towards plant-based?
I don't know his exact diet is personally. I do know that his chef and his trainer are both vegan. They had a copy of Game Changer as well before it came out to the public. Okay. There's a lot of influence there on LeBron. Chris Paul is one of his very good friends, completely vegan. I think it's in his ear about the benefits. So I don't know his exact diet, but I imagine he's pretty heavily plant-based.
Yeah, because I know there's a bunch of it. I love basketball. I used to play for a long time. Something like Kyrie, I think, went vegan as well. There's a bunch more NBA athletes that are transitioning to veganism. So it makes me happy to hear because
MD is another one. There's quite a few.
Yeah, they're leading the way basically. I definitely want to talk about your protein because I've had the opportunity to try it. So Fīta, actually, I'll tell you a funny story before I ask my question. I used to work in the supplement space for a long time. I used to work in that space for a long time. And so I was like, man, Game Changers should come out with a protein. And there's a friend of mine that is a manufacturer. I was like, dude, you should reach out to James because I feel like that would be such a good move. Mm-hmm. And then literally like a week after I get the email of like, we're launching Fīta. I was like, shit, I was a week too late basically. So what was kind of like the idea behind it? And why did you guys create it the way that you did? Because it's very different than all the other plant-based products that are out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't like we sort of planned, oh, we're going to do this. People from the Game Changers audience kept reaching out saying, hey, what high protein products do you recommend that would meet the film team's strict criteria at the intersection of health and performance that also taste great and are convenient? Yeah. So, for example, protein powders and bars. And honestly, like I couldn't really recommend any that I thought were that great. The texture, especially with protein powders, is typically pretty bad with plant proteins compared to whey.
Yeah, it's chalky.
And yeah, it's chalky or gritty, and it doesn't actually dissolve very well. That's why you need a lot more water with plant proteins. With ours, you don't. Because it's really sort of floating in the water. It's not really dissolving into the water. So yeah, we basically partnered with Anheuser-Busch, which is they make beer of all things, but they pull out the starch, and it's American-grown barley protein. So they pull out the starch, and they're left with the protein and fiber that's bound together, and then they separate that just using enzymes, and then you've created the world's most sustainable protein per life cycle analysis, so less water use, land use, pesticide use emissions, than anything else commercially available on the planet. And it's also up to 5 times more soluble than pea-protein, which gives it that texture. So we combined that upcycled barley protein with a whole food, whole ground lupin. So you've got a sprout, an ancient grain with an ancient bean, and we combine those together. And lupin's also very good for the environment. It's a soil regenerating crop. It's planted every 4 years, drives nitrogen back into the soil. So from a taste and texture perspective, we beat the 2 leading brands 3-1 in consumer testing at the National Food Lab. From an environmental perspective, it's considerably better than anything else. And then it's even got 20% more glutamine than whey protein, which has been shown to help with muscle recovery. So you figure out the fiber and the antioxidants coming from that whole food as well. So it's very different, you know.
And I think you guys are using monk fruit as a sweetener, right?
There's 1 gram of coconut nectar. So there's 1 gram of sugar there coming from coconut nectar, and then monk fruit. That's the combination. Yeah.
What made you guys go with monk fruit versus like stevia or any of those other sweeteners?
So a couple of things on stevia. There are in the literature a little bit of increasing concerns around too many steviosides coming from stevia. Too much a day. And then second of all, 15% of the population perceives stevia to be bitter and not sweet.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then there's some other health concerns that people are starting to get worried about with stevia, granted or not. So I think it's probably fine in lower doses as far as I can see. But we went with monk fruit because monk fruit's not only potentially neutral, but it's been shown to potentially have some health benefits.
Yeah. Well, I know you can't say them, but I'll say them on my side. Like there's cancer prevention benefits from them, helps like reduce inflammation. I come from the cancer world. And so like monk fruit is like a big sweetener that's used in the cancer world for that specific reason. So I know it is in supplement space. You can't make claims, but I'm just going to say it for you. It's really, monk fruit is really good for you. So basically it's through that process of, like you said, upcycled barley that you're able to make it that dissolvable, because it's pretty, I've tried, probably like 50 different plant-based products over the years. And this is the first one that you can just blend like that. And you literally have like nothing left besides the liquid.
For me, so I'll shake it with water milk, but I put it in coffee because it's the only sort of plant protein blend that really mixes well into coffee and doesn't, make it all thick and gritty or whatever. Put it in oatmeal, pancakes,
you ever tried tried a Ninja Creamy?
Everyone's been telling me about this the last few weeks. Yeah.
That we bought one. You put like mangoes and like strawberries frozen, put a little bit of unsweet almond milk, put a scoop of Fīta in there, and you just put it in there for 4 minutes. It makes the fluffiest protein.
Yeah. The only thing I found for me is if for our protein, because we don't use sunflower lecithin in ours at all, and then it's also very fine particles. I find if you put it on a high-powered blender for too long, it gets too fluffy for me. So some people say, hey, I love how fluffy it is. But I figured out a workaround, which is I blend the berries and the greens and everything first for me, and then I add the scoop of protein on low for 5 seconds at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some people think they love the fluffiness, and some people with the blender, if you blend it too long, it's too fluffy. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's good for an ice cream, but my wife, she'll make me a smoothie when I'm working, and normally I have like a big, large cup. And she came back one day with like 2 cups. And I was like, why'd you make me so much? She's like, I didn't. I just put Fīta in it. And it just like double the quantity of the smoothie.
Yeah. But like, again, it's like 50-50 on the fluffiness. People like, they seem to love it or they hate it. And for me, it was too much smoothie for me because my smoothie's already 42 ounces with Brazil nut seeds and pumpkin seeds and greens and berries and oats. And so I was like, it was too much for me and it got too fluffy. But people can just, do whatever they want. They can add it at the beginning or at the end.
It's great when you're in a deficit because you get so much more volume out of the same amount of calories. So it's like, I love it from a fat loss perspective. Yeah. Oh, beautiful, man. So ultimately, like, how can people, I know you guys have a lot of resources. You have recipes. Obviously, you have Fīta. Like, where can people find more? And besides the upcoming documentary, are you guys working on any new things that people can stay in tune for?
Well, our nonprofit's always working on stuff, but a lot of it's not particularly public facing. So we've been helping the Paris Olympics a bit with their plant-based meals choices. We publish some things in the peer-reviewed literature. We're the exclusive nutrition partner for the Green Sports Alliance, which is a large nonprofit. Every major league, NBA, MLB, NFL, all members of the Green Sports Alliance. So we're the exclusive nutrition partner there. So I sometimes give talks, like I gave a talk last year at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle on plant-based eating, because obviously people are becoming more and more aware that shifting towards more plant-forward eating is the number one thing you can do to help the planet. It's not just about your personal health, it's about the planet's health as well. So there's a lot of things that the non-profit's doing, and just most people don't see that stuff that's going on. We're working on the second film, so people can still follow our social media, or go on our website, gamechangersmovie.com. And then, Fīta.com is for the protein. It's also on Amazon. There's a few smaller things that we're working on, but most of it's not very public facing.
Yeah. Well, actually, you touched on an important point that I forgot to bring up. You were a part of the team for Eating Our Way to Extinction, right?
Yeah, I helped somewhat with that. So I was an executive producer on Eating Our Way to Extinction.
Because that's where I met you at the red carpet event there. That's why I met you and like Rich and everyone for the first time, like a few years ago. So how was it to work on that movie?
Yeah, it wasn't our film, right? It wasn't like the Game Changers where I was like heavily involved day to day. I was more helping, Mark Galvin and Ludo and those things sort of behind the scenes a little bit, on the marketing and a bit of distribution. And Joseph helped, my partner on the Game Changers. He helped with the storyline some. And so, it's a good film. I think it's, the experts in there are very sound. The science is very sound. Fortunately, not enough people have watched it, but it'd be great if people would go take a look.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll put all the links on below for the people listening, because it was a great documentary that I had the opportunity to watch at the event there. And I'll put all the links that you mentioned down below for people, for the Fīta, for Game Changers. I'm excited to see the second movie, because I think like there's definitely a need for that space. I'm in the body recomposition space, and that's people's main concern. It's still the protein and the muscle building and the being able to be athletic and be able to perform at their sports. That's still the main concern. So there's obviously still more education to be done in that realm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, James, any last words of wisdom? I always like to end on words of wisdom. What is something that you would like to pass off to the audience? Again, it doesn't have to be vegan related, just something that's been really powerful for you in your life.
Yeah, I don't know how powerful this is for people, but obviously, I don't think that people are aware of it consciously, but subconsciously, it's really hard to not get sucked into the stuff on social media these days. And I think people have just got to really take a step back, because you hear people all the time, whether it's they just start quoting things, like, oh, you can't drink coffee for the first 3 hours of the day because of cortisol. Well, if you follow that logic, you also couldn't work out for the first 3 hours of the day because the mechanism is similar on cortisol. So, but Huberman said it, so people think it must be true. So I think that's just the one thing is, especially for the younger generation, is there's so much information out there. The things that my 14-year-old son comes and tells me, he's like, seed oils, Dad, you can't have seed oils. I'm like, where do you get, I saw it on Instagram or TikTok. Yeah. I know, but there's no research. Yeah. So
I mean, people take it as is.
You're way better off doing seed oils than saturated fats. So, from animals. So anyway, so yeah, I just say like I don't think it's like a very key part of wisdom. I think everyone knows it, but just reinforcing that like don't believe everything you read on or watch on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, James, man, massive thank you for jumping on the podcast and taking the time. I really appreciate it. And again, for everyone listening, I'll put all the links down below. And then whenever the new movie is out, I'll do a giveaway. I'll buy some tickets for people to go and check it out, and we'll give them away when it goes when the movie goes live.
Yeah, and if you want people to have a discount, we can always put that down below as well for Fīta.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we definitely make that happen as well. I'll chat with your team after. I'll organize that. But yeah, massive thank you, man. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.